Okay, you can begin.
So good afternoon to you, sir, and good afternoon to the rest of my colleagues in class. Today, we are going to present to you Chapter 6 of the book, The Leadership Experience by Richard L. Daft. Our group members are myself, Ishmael Noel, Keith Bailey, and Kevin Frampton. The title of this chapter is Courage and Moral Leadership. There are five main topics in this chapter, which will be moral leadership today, acting like a moral leader, becoming a moral leader, servant leadership, and leadership courage. However, within those five major topics, there are other subtopics that will be covered during our presentation and include, but not limited to, things like the three levels of personal development, the three circles of moral courage, finding personal courage, drawing strength from others, and so on, as you can see on the um, on the slide here. Our topic has two major keywords in the title of the chapter. That will be courage and moral leadership. Now, Kevin will deal a little bit more on courage when he gets into detail on that. But just a quick, simple definition of what courage is according to the book. It's the ability to step forward through fear. And I know that you can picture some type of fearful situation that you've been in, and just that ability to draw from inside and step forward through that. And if we apply that to leadership, we can see that the definition given by the book, moral leadership, is really distinguishing right from wrong and doing right, seeking the just, honest, and good in the practice of leadership. So while leadership would have been defined earlier on in the book, this aspect of leadership is combining morality with the leadership practice. Mr. Daft started off this chapter in a very interesting way, where he highlighted what you see before you, a four-star general of the US Army that led forces in many battles. Um, General Eric Shinseki was a person that was described by many as being very brilliant. He was 38 years old, four-star general. Um, However, he would have done something that was considered very shocking and downright foolish among his peers. He stood up to one of the highest officers in the land in the US, which would be against the US Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. What happened is that at that time, the political environment was very warlike, and the defense secretary, along with his other political affiliates, were pushing for the Iraqi war. But in order to convince Congress to make that big spend, what they had to do is demonstrate to Congress that post-war, after the war, they will not be required to have any major deployment of US troops in Iraq. So General Shinseki, being the head of the armed forces, was called to testify before Congress. And instead of going with the political agenda, he basically stood up and spoke the truth, which was that it will, in fact, need quite a lot of troops on the ground, not just hundreds, but thousands of troops on the ground. And that was considered by his colleagues to be shooting himself in the foot. That had repercussions on both ends. One, in that for him, um, of course, he was ostracized. As a matter of fact, his boss, which is the Secretary of Defense, um, refused to go to his retirement party when that time came around. And he even announced his replacement 1 year before he was actually retired. On the other hand, it sparked um, in the military, that leadership that he showed, it sparked a drive to get others like him to stand up and speak out against that particular war and the agenda that was being pushed. Eventually, the Defense Secretary, Donald Rumsfeld, had to resign. This chapter, unlike the other chapters that went before in this book, doesn't focus on the mind and the heart of the leader. It actually focuses on the spirit of the leader. And in doing so, it talks about the ability to look within, to contemplate human condition, to think about what is right and wrong, to see what really matters in the world, and to have courage to stand up for what is worthy and right. And not just in terms of normal leadership ability, but it looks within the person, within the leader, and brings out that sense of morality in the leader, in his leadership ability. So I'm going to cover the first two major topics in the chapter, which deals with moral leadership today and acting like a moral leader, and then I will hand over to my colleagues. So moral leadership today, it, it, it brings to mind something that the author would have dealt with after bringing such a wonderful example of what a moral leader is. They then went on to speak about the bad examples, things that go wrong, and they highlighted in the chapter a lot of businessmen that had to resign, plenty resignations, and plenty companies going in the wrong direction because of the decisions that are made. And I'm sure that you can think of plenty situations like that in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean, where we see politicians, we see businessmen, we see religious leaders, public servants, and even public figures, what we would call in our local parlance, being in in a hot water as leaders. Quite recently, we would have had some social media issues going on involving leaders of our country in politics, right? So it's not far from us to imagine what that can be like. Quite the opposite from General Shinseki's, display of what leadership should be. The ethical climate in the U.S. business at this time and for some time in the past has been that organizations, leaders are under a lot more scrutiny because of unethical and illegal behaviors within their sphere. It is noted that organizations, shareholders, and the public, everyone loses when leaders don't uphold the high ethical standards that they're supposed to, starting within the organization itself. The morale, the commitment and performance deteriorate when employees stop having faith in their leaders. And I dare invite you, my colleagues, to think about your own organization that you work in with your leaders, what happens with you and your colleagues when this happens in an organization. The way that you feel, the commitment, the performance definitely drops, right? It also affects the business in terms of the consumers. People stop believing in the company and they leave, they take their business elsewhere. And more importantly, the investors. Shareholders don't want to invest or align their name and more so to put their money into businesses where the leaders of that business is unethical and practices illegal activities and so on. And sometimes it even takes them to the court to be able to retrieve and to protect their name and their business and their money. It goes on also to describe that the demands on leaders help in terms of making it difficult for them to act morally. And this demand is to the extent that the pressure to produce and to boost revenues and to save the client's partners and or needs, right? Money being the major component here drives them to act immoral, as well as their own self-interest. They sometimes are more of a greater effect than outright corruption because of their personal weaknesses and inability to stand up against corruption. Leaders act immorally so that they would appear to be wise to others as well. So it's all descriptive of the type of person who wants to be at the top, to reach that ultimate goal according to Maslow, but at the same time, they're doing it without considering the ethical and moral values of the position and the leadership role that they play. Sometimes, in order to understand how leaders end up in this, you have to consider what they do to make things go wrong. And to understand that, you must get a good hold of the meaning of the word integrity, which is the ability to uphold moral standards and behave morally. So the author speaks here about leaders that set the tone for the organization through their actions. And when those actions are motivated by selfishness and greed, many followers start to accept unethical behavior as being normal in the organization. And I'm sure that we in the Ministry of National Security can attest to that, where sometimes the wrong thing becomes the right thing, or the wrong things becomes the norm, and eventually what the book says or what the regulations say, and we just continue with the norm. I have lots of examples that we can use within the fire service, and I'm sure that you all have others as well. Instead of concentrating on what is best for the organization, sometimes big executives, they place more importance on having large offices, high pay, and other status symbols, right? So they try to climb that ladder of Maslow's hierarchy to get up there, to get that status and all of these things so quickly that they put aside all ethical values and so on. They frequently focus more on their own interests than on those of the company or the society at large in the case of the politicians and those who hold public office. Senior executives are unlikely to foster an atmosphere of trust and integrity if they demand high wages and benefits while the business is suffering and lay off of thousands of employees. I remember a discussion recently with some of my colleagues because of this industrial climate of the country right now with public servants. The question was, didn't the members of parliament recently, within the last few years, get their pay increases, their allowances increases, and all of these increases, but yet still, since 2013, public servants are still without an increase living on that salary while they are seen about themselves. Additionally, leaders that lack integrity frequently break their promises to others and are dishonest with their partners, consumers, vendors, and shareholders, making it very difficult to trust them. And because of that lack of trust, we spoke about the ripple effect in the entire organization, inside of the organization and external to the organization as well, right? People are routinely treated unfairly because unethical leaders who this by granting special favors or privileges to followers who stroke their egos, or by elevating people based on preference rather than on actual business outcomes. And we know of situations like this. You know, the persons that follow the leaders blindly and give that support, regardless of what they do, whether they're right, whether they're wrong, they follow and they benefit from that. Also, an unethical practice, but they support unethical leaders in the process, being showered with gifts and so. So there's a chart here, and I want you to think for a moment of probably two persons in your organization that fit these two criteria presented before you. One, an unethical leader, and the other, an ethical leader. And we can see that there's a great contrast in terms of what they do and some of the personalities and characteristics of these two individuals. One, the unethical leader is an arrogant and self-serving person, while the ethical leader possesses more humility. And the ethical leader maintains concern for the greater good, while the unethical leader excessively promotes self-interest, right? It goes on to describe all of these differences in terms of an unethical leader and an ethical leader, where the unethical leader shifts blame to others, while the ethical leader is someone that takes responsibility. Mr. Bailey will be dealing a bit more on some of these things and going into more detail with them. But before you hear, we have a clear example of the contrast of an unethical leader and an ethical leader, right? And the last thing on the ethical leader, lacks courage and to confront unjust acts, and the ethical leader shows courage to stand up for what is right, which is very much like the general described at the beginning of the presentation. But Kevin Franktom will deal more on the issue of courage, and he will go more in detail about what courage is and how you can present yourself courageous during these situations. Acting like a moral leader. This is the second topic. So many leaders forget that business is about values and not just about economic performance. It's not just about the money, but it is everything, the holistic idea of leading an organization is not just about the business, but the development of the people in the organization, the values that the organization stand for, and the employees, the customers, and shareholders. So in order to act like a moral leader, you must consider that moral leadership doesn't mean that you ignore that profit side or the profit and loss, just the stock and the prices and production costs. And so it doesn't mean that you ignore it. What it means is that you are required to recognize the importance of moral values, human meaning, quality, and higher purpose while you perform the duties of trying to get the best profits. So it takes you to understand that while you're doing what you're doing to try to get the high profits for the organization, while you're trying to get production, to the maximum and cost as low as possible, you need to do that while considering all of the moral values and the humans that are working hard to get that done for you, and the people who you are selling it to, the products to, and the people who are investing. You must understand that it's the quality of your moral values must be demonstrated while trying to achieve all of these goals. How do you get to that point of acting like a moral leader? There are simple steps that you can follow. One is to develop, articulate, and uphold high moral principles in every situation that presents itself in your business and in your personal life as well. Focus on what is right for the organization as well as the people who are involved in the organization, and not just about dollars and cents. Set the example of what you want others to live by demonstrating within your practices, within your operations, what you want others to follow. Be honest with yourself and others, which is something very difficult for some people to do, right? drive out fear and eliminate undiscussables. Now, Mr. Kevin Frampton is going to talk about fear and how that comes into leadership. But the undiscussables, things that people don't want to talk about, bring that to the table and establish and communicate ethics policies. And the next slide, we're going to give you an example of a company's ethical policies that speak to how, where the business stands for and the leadership of the business, how they take front by establishing those policies. Develop a backbone and show zero tolerance for ethical violations, right, within your policy. Reward ethical conduct. So on one hand, the unethical behaviors will be punished and the ethical behaviors will be rewarded. And treat everyone with fairness, dignity, and respect, right? And not just from the higher order of the organization, but also the lower order of the organization. I remember, and I'm sure you all could remember as well too, now passing out, now coming out of recruitment stage and you're going into your organization and you're working what we call on the lines. For fire officers, we are there watching at the senior officers, the senior men in the service. They are going out from the time the bell drop and they're going out on their calls, and you are the least of the Mohicans in the station waiting for your opportunity to go out. But that was a practical aspect of the job in terms of the hierarchy there. But what this is saying is that you must also pay focus to not just the practical aspect, but also in the way that people are treated, not because they are junior or the lesser staff in the organization at the bottom of the table, the cleaner, the person that mops, the person that serves the tea, they must be treated in a different way um, to those who are making the six-digit figures, right? Do the right thing in both your private and professional life, even if no one is looking. And that's a consideration that is definitely there to help you practice moral leadership. Now, this is a good template for any organization. The Transworld Entertainment Corporation Code of Ethics has presented their general statement policy concerning ethical behavior in the organization and what the organization stands for. Just picture going into an organization like this and seeing that policy posted up with the signature of the CEO of the company. And it is also demonstrated when you see the actions of the CEO and the top managers of the company behaving in what you see before you here. It will encourage you as an employee of the organization, a shareholder, even a consumer that comes into the business and you're seeing it practice, gives you the confidence to stay with that company, right? So honesty and candor in our activities, including observations of the spirit as well as the letter of the law, right? We not just focus on what is written, but also what is implied and what is intended in the behaviors, avoidance of conflict between personal interests and in the interests of the company, or even the appearance of such conflict. And this speaks about sometimes you and I might know that we did this above board, but because of what it is, there's a tendency for it to have an appearance as something else. And this policy is saying that if it appears a particular way, even though it is not, you should make every effort to make it appear as though it is right and honest and just, right? Avoidance of company payments to candidates running for government posts or government officials. Now, this is a policy statement of the company that they will not be found it's in the hands of politicians, whether in office or not, right? It's an ethical stance signed off by the CEO of the company. Compliance with general accepted accounting principles and control, maintenance of our reputation and avoidance of activities which might reflect adversely on the company, and finally, integrity in dealing with the company's assets. All of these things represent what the company stands for. And once the leadership of the organization demonstrate that in their day-to-day operations in the organization and outside of the organization in the private life, this is going to foster that type of commitment by everyone associated with the organization, internally and externally. I now want to hand you over to my colleague, Keith Bailey, to continue from here.
Good day, everyone. Good day, everyone. Nice discourse, Mr. Noel. Nice discourse. Hope everybody's feeling good, feeling inspired. What we can see, moral leadership has a lot of perks to be a moral leader, and things that we need to know, right? So leadership is not merely a set of practices with no association with right or wrong, right? What we can say is that all leadership practices can be used for good or evil, and thus have a moral dimension or a moral compass attached to it. Leaders, right? I'm going to repeat. Leaders choose whether to act from selfishness and greed to diminish others in a way that serves or is self-serving, or they can motivate others to develop their full potential as employees and also as human beings. One such person, right? Before we come to that, some leaders in the past, right, such as Hitler or Cambodia, Pol Pot, they were immoral leaders. But according to what Mr. Noel mentioned, he mentioned a four-star general, but it doesn't always come from moral leadership, doesn't always come from that aspect. It could come from a simple person, a simple individual. That individual name was Raoul Wallenberg, right? Who is this guy? Who is this person? You ask, who is this Mr. Raoul Wallenberg? Wallenberg was a 32-year-old in 1944. Came from a wealthy, politically connected, upper-class Swede, right? From a prominent family, well-respected family. But he took a role. He assumed a role. What did he do? I'll tell you what he did. Raoul, he had emerged from a dismal period in human history as a courageous leader who made the ultimate sacrifice for what he believed, mostly what he had believed in. Most leaders today never have an opportunity, or in that time never had the opportunity to save lives. And few leaders help as many persons as Wallenberg did. But the principles of moral leadership he demonstrated are valuable to anyone who aspire to make a positive difference in the world. Now, you want to know what this individual did? What he did during the waning months of World War II. This young man had climbed from atop the roof of a train. And what he did is pass out fake passports to save individuals. And these individuals were astonished Jews. What happened is that by the time the cars were loaded, the soldiers were so dumbfounded by the young man's actions that they simply stood there and let the cars pass. In other words, they admired his courage, right? And he had managed to save dozens of Jews who were headed for the death camp. Isn't that inspiring? So we can see Raoul Wallenberg, his moral leadership uplifted people. That's what he did. Special personality characteristics such as ego strength, self-confidence, and a sense of independence, they enable leaders to behave morally in the face of opposition. Confidence, you must have confidence. Confidence is a key requirement, right, of moral courage, because it moves leaders from contemplating what is right to act on their moral values. And leaders, they have to develop these characters through their own hard work. It's something you have to work at. And how do you work at it? We were not born with it. It's something that we have to probably develop over a period of time. So there are 3 levels of personal moral development. First one, level 1, is the pre-conventional phase, right? Initially, you follow the rules to avoid punishment. You join a work, you join an establishment, you're towing the line, as you say, you're towing the line, right? You want to avoid punishment. You're doing everything you're supposed to do. You learn, come like you say, you're learning the work. We learn what we're supposed to do. You toe the line, learn the work, right? You act in your own interest, right? You have what's called blind obedience to authority for its own sake. So in other words, the supervisor comes, the head of the organization comes to talk to you. Hey, give the instructions, you follow, you adapt. Because you're learning the work. You don't get your wings as yet. Then you have the level 2 phase, the conventional. There, you live up to the expectations of others. So now you start to learn the work, so you want to live up to the expectation of the organization, right? You fulfill all the roles, all the duties, the obligations, right, of the social system in the organization. But you want to aspire to be phase 3, level 3, the post-conventional system, right? The post-conventional. They follow internalized universal principles of justice and right. Balances concern for self with concern for others. So that balance. You care about yourself and you love yourself. You love your portfolio, what you're doing, but you also have a concern for others. You have to marry two together and for the common good, right? The acts that you do are independent and ethical, right? It must be in an ethical manner, regardless of expectation of others. In other words, you can't depend on no batch. You know, so basically we call batch and batch and batch. You don't study no batch. It's not no batch thing. You do writing because a batch is so, a batch is so. It's the interest of the organization, interest of the people who you pledged to serve. And the military people or the paramilitary or the quasi-military people in this group will understand that. There are 3 circles of moral courage, right? 3 circles. And I prefer to use these circles as in a Venn diagram, right? And you know the Venn diagram, there are 3 circles and they intersect, right? And where those 3 intersect, I refer to that there as the combination, and that's where moral courage comes into play. But there are 3 facets attached to moral courage. First, you have the principles, right? So when you're faced with a choice, leaders can assess the situation to determine whether it requires moral courage and then determine the specific values that need to be upheld. And I'm going to expand on that just now. Then you have the danger. You accurately assess the degree of risk. Everything, any decision you make have a risk. I call it calculable risk, right? You assess, you do a proper risk assessment. What the potential negative consequences of the actions are, right? And make a conscious decision by standing up for your convictions and make sure it is worth the risk. So some people say, oh, I call my name Billy, you are doing there, you are sacrificial lamb. Boy, that career suicide. So you have to make that assessment if it's worth the risk, especially if you want to have if you want to practice with your moral compass. Endurance. What the potential negative consequence of the actions might be, and make a conscious decision, that standing up for the conviction is worth the risk. And that word endurance, as I normally tell the lower ranks and some people, that word endurance, as a moral leader, you have to have endurance. You're going with them for the distance. You're practicing with them. You're going with them. You're doing everything you need because you need that kind of support. You're grooming people to be leaders, right? So, exactly, right? So we have servant leadership here now. Now, servant leadership is serving people. It encourages change towards turning followers into leaders. So what you are doing actually is that the people you are supervising, the people who you are supposed to be leading, you want to change their thinking, the mindset. You want to change the operation. Because when they put you to supervise people, they put you as an FSO station, officer in charge of a unit, right? yes, you are the head. You organize, you organize plan, organize staff, lead and control. However, you want to encourage these people to be leaders in their own way and with a moral compass. To encourage change, right, toward turning followers into leaders. You're grooming them, you're coaching them, thereby developing their potential rather than using leadership position to control people or to limit them. You're not limiting them, right? You're bringing out their leadership traits, right? In the first stage, when they come, the subordinates are passive. They listen to instructions. They're not expected to think of for themselves like somebody not coming in the organization. You don't expect them to be independent thinkers. They're not learning the work, right? But they just simply do as you're told. Then can be stage two, is that the continuum involves subordinates are more actively working on their own. So they learn the work and they start to function on their own there now. Then stage three is stewardship, which represents a significant shift in the mindset of by moving responsibility and authority from leaders to followers. What do you mean by that? Right? It means that there's a shift, right? From leader, from you as being in charge. You want the mindset shift to the people you are leading because you want to, they are followers, but now you want to coach them into leadership role, right? Then you have, next slide, please. You have developing their potential rather than using the potential to control or limit them, right? And the ultimate expression of this leadership approach, well, as we call it, it's servant leadership. You're molding them, you want them to lead. Traditional organizations were based on the idea that the leader is in charge of subordinates, and the success of the organization depends on the leader control over followers. That was traditional, but that is not so. That is ever changing, right? So we want to change that focus. We want to shift that focus here now. So next slide, we have the changing leader focus from self to others. You want to change that focus from yourself to others. And stage one, well, you are the authoritarian leader, right? People are obedient to you, subordinates. Then you get them in a phase of being participative. You are right. Team players, they become team players. Then you have stewardship, leadership, and you are merging. You are actually migrating from your authoritative role down to be a servant. That is the natural progression of things for you. But I don't know if you observe it carefully, right? Is that while you are coming up from down and going lower into the ranks with them, they are stepping up. So, and then because you have them being obedient subordinates, then they become team players, and then you have them as self-responsible employees. And now they are so motivated, they are so empowered, they become whole employees. So you're moving from the centralized leadership role to right to, and you can see control centered in the followers. In other words, you meet them there harmoniously. There's a harmonious transition. And we have how to manage this, right? The authoritarian management. We have the styles of leadership. Another big word they call it now, management, according to the text that we utilize. Right. In this, we have the traditional understanding, right? The way back understand that leadership is that leaders are good managers who direct and control people. That is what we always believe, right? Followers, they're obedient to subordinates and they follow others. You have, right, the power of purpose, right? And you also have to believe that, especially in the military, you have it, where the privilege resides with those at the top of the organization. They have the power, they have the purpose, and in our case, the executive. At this stage, leaders set the strategy and goals as well as the methods and rewarding and attaining them. That was always done by the top echelons of the organization. They also had the organizational stability and efficiency were paramount, and followers are routinized and controlled along the machines, right, of raw materials. It means that they work with people. You have to believe you work with people and they come like robots, subordinates are given no voice. They have no voice in creating meaning, right, or purpose for their work, and no discretion as to how they perform their job. In other words, they have no say, minimum or no say at all. Do what we tell you to do. Comply, then complain. As I say before, comply, then complain. But that makes no sense complaining because you already complied, right? And this leadership mindset emphasizes the tight top-down control. That's not a horizontal approach, but top-down, right, of employee standardization and specialization, and management in personal measurement and the analysis. So we have move on to the participative management style, or I call it more like a democratic style, where, right, the participative management style. This is in the 1980s. Many organizations have made efforts to actively involve employees. They are engaging employees now since 1980, right? Leaders have increased employee participation through employee suggestion program, participation groups, and quality circles. So that's why sometimes you see they have suggestion boxes. You have certain little sessions, little sessions, and you ask them, their opinions. You want to get their opinion, the ideas, what they think, because you want to make them feel valued, right? And also, leaders are responsible for the outcome. But always bear in mind, leaders are responsible for the outcome. They may act as mentors and coaches, but they have not given up some of their control. That reminds you of what? That reminds you of delegation, right? That kind of delegated kind of thing. Because delegate responsibility, but you have the ultimate control and results. Well, you have to take responsibility for it, right? So they're given some form of control, and they are still responsible for the moral, emotional well-being, and performance of the subordinates, which can lead to treating followers as if they are not able to think for themselves. So now we have stewardship, right? Stewardship is the belief that leaders are deeply accountable to others. In other words, you are serving, you're representing an organization, you are accountable, right? You have to be accountable to others, as well as to the organization, without trying to control others. And there are phases in that, right? You have the reorient towards partnership of assumptions. And what do you mean by that? Right. What we mean by that is that partnership can happen only when power and control shifts away from formal leaders to the core workers. Right? Partners have the right to say no to one another. They are usually or totally honest with one another, neither hiding information nor protecting the other from bad news. Then we have the localized decision and power to those closest to the work and the customer. So decision-making power and the authority to act, it should reside at the point where the work gets done. Recognize and reward the value of labor. And everybody like that fancy word there, reward, right? And recognition. So what that means that there's a reward system that ties into everyone's effort, right? What that does, it ties everyone's fortunes to the success of the enterprise. So this stewardship involves distribution of wealth by designing compensation so that the core workers can make significant gains when they make exceptional contributions. In other words, you're rewarding the effort. And then you have the expect core work teams to build the organization. You want them to build the organization. You want them to be part of the organization, to own it, as you should see. Team of workers who make up the core of the organization or division, they will define the goals. They will maintain the controls, right? Create a nurturing environment. Treat individuals as individuals. That's what they do. And organize and reorganize themselves to respond to the changing environment of the marketplace in which they serve. Stewardship leaders guide the organization without dominating. So you're guiding the organization, you're not dominating anybody, right? And they facilitate followers without controlling them. It allows for relationship between leaders and followers in which makes each in which each makes significant self-responsible contribution to the organization's success. It gives followers a chance to use their mind. So they're using their mind. You understand? They're free to use their mind. They're not robots. Their bodies, right? The resources, right? The spirit on the job, thereby allowing them to be whole individual human beings. So they give it all. They give the emotional, the physical, the mental, everything they're given, right? Stewardship leaders can help organizations thrive today into this complex environment because they tap into the energy and commitment of followers. We have that synergy going. Understand? Encouraging that synergy. Servant leaders, next slide please. Servant leaders take stewardship assumptions about leaders and their followers one step further. This is what servant leadership does. What does servant leadership do? As opposed to the stewardship, servant care a step further. Is a leadership upside down system. Servant leadership, it transcends from self-interest to serve the needs of others, help them grow and develop and provide opportunities for others to gain materially and emotionally. These leaders' top priority is service to employees, customers, shareholders, and general public. And there's a Greenleaf model that will explain that and what the Greenleaf model actually does. The Greenleaf model, it puts service before self-interest. Right? It focuses on that. And what it means that servant leaders make a decision or make a conscious choice to use their gift in the cause of change and growth of individuals and or the organization. They listen first to affirm others. So the servant leader doesn't have the answers, right? He asks questions. And one of the servant leader's greatest gifts to others is listening, fully understanding the problems that they may face and affirming his confidence in others. You trust them, right? To inspire also trust by being trustworthy. Trustworthiness is very important. Servant leaders, they build trust by doing what they say they will do, being totally honest with others, giving up control and focusing on the well-being of others. And last but not least, they nourish others and help them become whole. Right? Servant leaders, they care about followers' spirit as well as their minds and their bodies. They believe in the unique potential of each individual or each person to have a positive impact on the world. That is what they focus on. And servant leaders, they help others find the power of human spirit and accept responsibility. So I'll now hand over to Mr. Kevin Frankton as he deals with leadership courage. Thank you.
Yes, good good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, class. All right. Firstly, I want to thank Mr. Bailey and Mr. Noel for covering the previous parts of the chapter. And I'm just gonna, to start my presentation, I'm just gonna go back to the key words that Noel identified. What the chapter is really concerned with, which is leadership and courage. Right. So the first part starts with not looking at the words in isolation, but really puts them together and says what leadership courage is about. And leadership courage is the ability to step forward through fear. Courage is both a moral and a practical matter to leaders. In a sense, this means that a leader not only vocalizes um, vocalizes his stance, his moral or ethical stance, right? He also actions it. So it's not about saying, for example, in the quiet corners, or maybe a little a place with your peers, I would do this, or I shouldn't do that, or I would do this, right? He really presents himself in a manner where he shows, not just by talking about it, by also demonstrating what is his stance, what is his moral stance or ethical stance, right? Additionally, courage means accepting responsibilities. All leaders are not leaders specifically, but as individuals, when we make decisions and we wanna make those decisions by pushing through fear, showing our courage, we need to accept responsibility for whatever decisions that you make, or whatever the consequences may be as a result of that action. So, for example, let me say, and a leader sees something that may be unethical or wrong. In his mind, he is going to say, you know what, this is my moral standpoint, and it's wrong, and I'm gonna talk about it. And the consequences for that maybe he's going to be unemployed, maybe he may be fired, he may be disciplined, he may appear before some disciplinary tribunal or something like that. He may be scorned by members of the public. He may be ridiculed by his colleagues, right? But regardless of what the consequences are, that leader believes that he's standing on firm grounds, firm ethical and moral grounds, and he is not confused or conflicted to this is the right thing to do. Courage also means pushing through or pushing beyond your comfort zone. So it's not just about sitting back and what we call going through the motions. Some people may fall into the crowd and say, you know what, I'm not gonna upset the apple cart. I'm just gonna sit back. I'm gonna wait for my promotion, or they say at the end of the month when I check my card and I see my money there, that's all I'm concerned about. Leaders don't function like that. It's inherent in them to say, listen, I am not gonna accept the unacceptable. I'm gonna push through. I'm gonna make the situation uncomfortable because I recognize there are immoral things taking place. There are unethical taking place, and perhaps it may be even illegal. Right? Courage also means asking for what you want and saying what you think. When leaders adopt this position, they create a they set the tone really for the organization, and say this is my stance, and everybody, when they look at him, they're gonna see him as the person whose step you need to follow, right? And he is very aggressive in pursuing what is right and what is just. Is about fairness and equity, and he has no shame in pointing out or identifying wrongdoing, right? That is a huge part of what being a leader is about. Not being discouraged or fearful to stand and be counted as the person who did the right thing. Courage also means fighting for what you believe in. And we all in some way, some form or the other, even in our personal lives, once we assign a particular value to something, we are willing to fight for it, right? Because it has value. It may have personal value, it may have sentimental value, right? It may be valuable to somebody else, right? Somebody that you care about. But you ascribe a particular value to it, and leaders haven't identified what is valuable, right? They fight aggressively and tirelessly, right? To protect that asset. Next slide, please. Courage is both a moral and practical matter for leaders. As I mentioned before, right? Leaders have a moral conviction in what they believe in, despite what others may say or believe. And that is the verbal part I spoke about, to bring together the practical matter and the moral matter of what courage is, right? They don't just go in little corners and whisper, they vocalize it. Everybody, from the time they see that person, they know what that person stands for because they put it outside there. So people know, hey, listen, that person, you can't do that, or don't say that, or don't be caught by him or her doing the wrong thing, and they set that tone, right? Leaders must also have the guts to demonstrate in both action and words. And when we say the guts, I mean we could use other words in Spanish. We could say cojones, or we could say balls or guts without fear, right? To not just talk about what you want to do, but also to action it, to follow through. That follow through rather than vocalizing it alone. You must have that follow through to really be identified or to be viewed even as a person who not just have views but they have convictions in getting it done. Leaders chart the way forward and have a tremendous influence among those who look up to them. The other practical part, because when you set the tone for the organization, the individuals, or as we learned in management 1 to 5, we call them followers, right? And followers are motivated in different ways. And one of the ways followers are motivated is when they recognize somebody, who they view, who who demonstrate, who exemplify what they look for. They are very inclined to follow that person, sometimes blindly, but a leader must have that that charisma, right? To um to be that kind of leader where people are motivated by being empowered through truth, through justice, through honesty, through moral conviction. Next slide, please. Right. Courage also means accepting responsibility for your actions, and this slide goes more in depth into what I discussed earlier about a leader not only vocalizing but demonstrating a willingness to accept responsibilities for their actions. And good leaders challenge the status quo. They aren't followers, right? They aren't followers. They are leaders, right? And they go against the grain. And whenever in every nook and cranny of the organization, or even in their personal lives, they stand out because of their conviction, right? And their willingness to challenge um, what they perceive to be wrong or immoral. And I mean, this could be, it could be racial discrimination, it could be racial bias, it could be discrimination based on gender, it could be um, discrimination based on socioeconomical background, it could be race. In every aspect of their lives, they challenge the status quo, especially when that status quo is wrong, or where it imposes hardship on people who don't benefit from the status quo. They recognize what the risk is. This risk is usually of a personal nature, and that's what makes a leader a leader. Because when they adopt a position and they identify this thing has value to them, and they take the risk, is because leaders identify what those risks are and how it's going to impact them. And generally, when it impacts them personally, it could be on any level. It could impact their family lives. For example, if they are fired, that effect, it trickles down to the ability to support their families, and maybe that's normal to pay bills and all these kind of things. The fact and good leaders identify the risk and assume the responsibility anyway, right? The risk includes ridicule from their peers, loss of employment, as I mentioned before, damage to their personal or professional reputation. They can be socially ostracized, and we have seen that in our various organizations, where somebody stands up and it stands up for the right thing, and somebody might say The thing was going real good from before. I don't know why this person said that. I don't know why that person said that. The commander upset the article hard. So now everybody's going to be scrutinized a little bit more, which forces them to fall more in line with what the organization or even what the supervisor intends them to be, which is to do things the correct way. And leaders also show courage by accepting the responsibility for failure, right? Accepting failure is the first step of success. Is to recognize where you made mistakes, right? Is to recognize where you can make improvements. Is a recognition to try something different where you wouldn't get the same result. So it is an opportunity to learn. This photograph here is of Miss Barbara Johns. Um, Miss Johns, right, displayed tremendous courage and moral leadership on the 23rd of April, 1951. She led students from her segregated school on a 2-week strike during the civil rights movement after a bus of white students refused to pick her up. And this is at the height of the civil rights movement in the United States, right? Because of her stance, right, she was able to ignite other people from both races, both white and African American, to stand up and say, listen, this segregation thing here, this isn't right, right? And because of her actions, she even ignited or motivated the NAACP to join her cause, and they sued the state to have desegregated schools. And as we could all see now throughout the US, there are no longer any segregated schools. And just to give a little context, she displayed this characteristic when she was only 16 years old. So that tells you that leadership or that courageous leadership is not something that people are generally born with, but it's something that could be learned and could be taught as well. Next slide, please. Courage means pushing beyond your comfort zone. It means identifying that you have limits and pushing through those limits. And leaders encounter a wall of internal fear. And we know this is true because we all are to some degree leaders in our various organizations. And sometimes when you have to challenge the status quo, it stirs emotions in you, and it's a wide spectrum of emotions. It may be fear sometimes, right? It could be it's anger, right? And those different types of emotions really act as a catalyst, right? For identifying what are the wrong things, saying that we're not going to accept it anymore. We make a moral standpoint, or we decide, this criminal activity, I'm not gonna be part of it. Or and not being part of it is one aspect of it, is also reporting it to ensure that doesn't continue to happen, and it's perceived that that is the order of the day. Unethical behavior, criminal behavior, and immoral behavior cannot be the order of the day. So leaders push through that fear, and it's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of introspection and to dig deep within yourself to find that courage to push through. Right? Courage means asking for what you want and saying what you think. Leaders have to speak out and inspire others. And again, I mentioned this before about inspiring and influencing others, what we identify as followers. Because in any organization, the leader is viewed as that beacon, is that safe place when we're looking for knowledge, right, or guidance. And they really set the tone, right, which is aligned with their moral values, or their stance, which also must align with the core values of the organization itself, right? They don't fear the repercussion despite voicing unpopular opinions, And we sometimes, we know how that goes. You may be that one voice out of 100, and sometimes, when you voice your opinions, those other 99 voices seem to try to drown out what you are saying. But a grain of sand is still a grain of sand in a glass of water. It's still a grain of sand. So they are not they are not fearful of vocalizing unpopular decisions. And it also means saying what they want and setting boundaries. Those boundaries are like drawing a solid line, in the middle of the road and say, don't cross this line. This is what I mean. This is what is my ethical stand. This is my moral stand. Good leaders send that message early. And once it's sent early, um, people receive it, right? Courage means fighting for what you want. Again, it's just going more into detail about how leaders fight for what they believe in. They seek the outcome that is beneficial. They seek the outcome that is beneficial to the whole and not themselves. So leadership, a characteristic of good leadership and courage, so we emphasizing courage here, is is based on a person's willingness to make selfless decisions, decisions that benefit everyone and not just themselves. And leaders are also risk takers, but do so because they see the bigger picture. They take risks for things that they deeply care about, even when it comes at personal sacrifice such as failure or scorn. They are concerned with equity and fairness. Next slide, please. How does courage apply to moral leadership? I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory, but to wrap it up in a nice little bow, it simply means that you have to treat people like human beings, not as a commodity, not as a tool that could be used and set aside and to pick it up again whenever you're convenient. It's about recognizing that people are human beings and they are entitled to respect and in integrity and kindness and love and all these things, and no matter what they are, they will not be discriminated against regardless of their gender, their sex, their religion, etc. Next slide, please. So we have this diagram here, which is a little exercise, right, to assess your moral courage. I'm just going to read the top of it, right, and you can fill it out, and it's going to give you a fair idea once you honestly answer the questions as truthfully as possible, right, whether your answer is mostly true or mostly false, right? So think about your situation in which each think about a situation which you either assumed or was given a leadership role in a group or organization. Imagine using your own courage as a leader. To what extent does each of the following statements characterize your leadership? Please answer whether each item below is mostly true or mostly false. So this is a nice little self-test here to see exactly where your moral compass lies. Right? So take a look at it. Leaders are we also looking at acting as a moral leader requires personal courage. And the question is personal courage, but where do we get personal courage? Leaders have to know themselves. Leaders have to know where their moral compass are. What are the things that they deeply believe in, and the things that they are willing to fight for, right? That is how you find it within yourself, right? And we must also understand, they must also understand their strengths and weaknesses. and not just in themselves, also in individuals. So leaders must also be able to identify that in the people who are on the lower part of the organization, in order to use them effectively, right? They must know what they stand for and often be non-conformists. And we are not talking about non-conformists because some people just want to be non-conformist because they just want to argue for the sake of arguing, right? But a leader stands on solid grounds of righteousness, if we want to put it like that. And being a non-conformist is really challenging. And a light on wrongdoing. That is what it means by being a non-conformist, right? They must do a honest self-analysis. Honest self-analysis can be painful, and sometimes, if we look within ourselves, sometimes, and we know that we're talking about morality, and we aren't the most moral people, and we want to be better. We want to be inspired to be better. What we see inside of us sometimes is be painful, but you can still strive to be better, right? And a good leadership can help anybody, right, to look within themselves and try to be better than what they are, because the leaders are the examples that you are going to follow. And acting like a leader also takes some emotional strength, because you had to be strong and push through, because sometimes when you fight for the good things, it may not be let's say, to use a boxing term, a one wrong fight or a two wrong fight. It may be a 12 wrong fight, or how they used to do it a long time, 15 wrongs in boxing. And to do that, it takes a significant amount of emotional strength. Next chapter, please. Next slide, please. Right. Employees' disclosure of illegal, immoral, or unethical practices in the organization. Wanting to do what is right, even so, it really tells you something about yourself, right? If you have to do, or you believe that you are a moral person or ethical person, that if there isn't anyone over you, it what we call a big stick. Are you going to do the right thing? Leaders do the right thing even when no one is there looking at them. And that is what sets them out or sets them apart from, I don't want to say regular people, but people who aren't in in leadership positions, who demonstrate more good moral leadership or ethical behavior, right? And we will also look at the policy of whistleblowing. Whistleblowing has become a very prevalent has become very prevalent in recent years. It comes at a high risk to the individual who highlights the wrongdoing, right? Again, right? Another, you know, um, brightly shining characteristic of a leader, right? And they shine light in all the dark spaces, right? And it comes at a cost, right? Finding personal courage. We we have to we have been conditioned to follow the rules and not rock the boat. It goes back to the same example I was talking about before, where we become conformists, right? We don't wanna upset the apple cart. We are content to what we call go through the motions, where we say, I ain't going to do nothing to upset this, because as long as my pay in the bank, right, them could do what I want, right? Um, that is not where you find your personal courage. You find your personal courage doing the opposite of it, not being a conformist, right? Not adhering to the status quo, right? And you commit to causes that you believe in, because when you believe in something, right, you hold on to it, you hold on to it dearly, and you fight you fight you fight for it to ensure that no one takes that away from you, right? You connect with others. Sometimes when we are not able to find our own personal courage, sometimes having people that you rely on, right, a good support structure, you draw your personal courage from them. They infuse you with that personal courage, or we could call it that second wind if you're running a race, right? And you start to become tired, you get that second wind from by connecting with others to assist you, right? To find your personal courage. And leaders also welcome failure as a natural and beneficial part of life, and they harness that anger. So when leaders fail sometimes, because a lot of life really is about growing after failure, or getting up after failure, or standing up after failure. So their philosophy is really, when I hit rock bottom and I look up, there is only up to go. There is no down because I'm at the bottom, right? And they draw from that and accept it. And as soon as they accept it, is the fastest they can start formulating a plan to become better, to stand, to rise again, which is the first step in towards success, right? And you use your anger, you harness your anger, right, to sometimes to to address immoral situations, right? Maybe I have a boss who is consistently doing wrong, right? And you reach the boiling point where you simply say, I can't take it anymore. The last straw that breaks the camel's back. And sometimes that last straw, right, the emotion it creates is sometimes it's anger. Sometimes it creates frustration. And you react and say, I'm not doing it anymore, I'm not accepted, and you blow the whistle, right? Or you report it, right? And leaders believe in finding a higher purpose. They find purposes that are bigger than themselves, right? So for example, if someone, you know, um, you're in a company, and something is wrong in the accounting department, right? What a leader does is not just treat the symptoms of what is going on. He finds the causal factors, that underlying thing, right? And when he's able to identify that and address it, it benefits everyone. So he has that vision, that foresight to see the bigger picture. And it's normally something that is bigger than themselves, or bigger than themselves, bigger than the employees, right? But it benefits everybody as a whole. It benefits the company. Leaders have a strong commitment to the larger vision or purpose, to find courage to step through fear. Fear is like a glass, like a ceiling, right? And leaders have um, maybe a sledgehammer, and they smash through fear fiercely, right? And challenge the wrongdoing. Next chapter, please. Right? They draw on strength from others, and caring about others and having support from others is a potent source of courage in the tipsy-turvy world, right? When leaders sometimes get tired sometimes, and they draw on others, right? It could be their staff, it could be their family members, it could be subordinates, right? They draw on strength from others because they realize what they are fighting for is bigger than themselves, right? And it motivates them to see their employees grow as individuals, right? Um, love is also a strong ingredient, right? And a strong ingredient for for drawing strength to fight for what it is you want, what it is leaders want, right? And it comes at a big sacrifice because they are willing to make that sacrifice easily because of the value they place on the item or the situation, right? And leaders who genuinely care about people, they work with them and take a risk to help those people to grow and succeed. Right? So it's about teamwork. It's all about teamwork and having support from others is also a source. And the best leaders aren't afraid to lean on others, right, when they need it. They go to their staff, right, and say, listen, this is the situation here, and they are honest. This is the situation here, and I need your help to fix it. I need your help to fix it. And the employees, right, once they believe that he has the the ability to fix it, they commit to him and they work harder together with him to achieve the desired goal, desired outcome for everyone. Being part of an organizational team that is supportive and caring, or having a loving and supported family at home, can reduce the fear and failure and help people take risks they otherwise will not take. And that is absolutely true. Our support structure, even as men and women of all families, our support structure. And for the leader of an organization, his staff is his support structure, or his management team may be his support structure, and he leans on them to get the job done, right? And they also welcome failure because they recognize that failure is the first step in achieving success. It's about accepting the reality of failure and being able to push through. And they are not discouraged by the failure, right? Leaders can redefine failure away from its negative association, and it is an important first step towards success. Yes, it is. Absolutely. When people accept failure and are at peace with the worst possible outcome, they can only go up. And leaders recognize that once you hit rock bottom, there's only one place to go. You can only go up. Next slide, please. Right, and harnessing frustration and anger. People in our organization can harness their anger to deal with difficult situations. Right? Sometimes outrage over a perceived injustice can give a mild-mannered person the courage to confront the boss, right, head on. Getting getting mad at yourself may be the motivation you need. Anger in moderate amounts is a healthy emotion that provides energy to move forward. It's about harnessing your emotions and directing it appropriately towards achieving your goal. And if your goal is to report, in this context we're talking about ethics and morals, is to unearth unethical behavior, you you harness your anger and your energy and you focus it in that direction. Next slide, please. This brings us to the end of our presentation on chapter 6. Right? During our presentation, we covered the areas of moral leadership today: acting like a moral leader, becoming a moral leader, servant leadership, and leadership courage. This is all the subheads that we covered throughout the presentation. Right? We appreciate your time and patience for our presentation, right? And thank you. And are there any questions?
Okay, if there are no questions, I'll stop the recording now.